What if one of the biggest cable news brands in America suddenly changed its name, and even its own star anchor admits she's not quite sure how to pronounce it? That's exactly what's happening right now with MSNBC, which is rebranding itself as MS Now. The announcement has stirred up confusion, laughter, and a whole lot of conversation online. Even Rachel Maddow, one of the network's most recognizable personalities, has openly confessed that the name doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. But beyond the jokes and the awkward confessions, there's a bigger story here about the future of the network, its new parent company, and why leaders think this shift could be a good thing in the long run. Rachel Maddow, who has long been one of MSNBC's most watched and respected anchors, admitted in an interview with Variety that she has no idea how to pronounce MS Now. And she's not alone. Social media users have been poking fun at the rebrand, with many saying the name feels clunky or unnecessary. Maddow even lightheartedly joked that, if nothing else, the new title brings an efficiency gain, because the syllable count drops from 5 in MSNBC down to 3 in MS Now. Her candid admission highlights what many viewers are already feeling. The name change isn't exactly intuitive, and it may take some time before it feels natural to say, but the name change isn't happening in a vacuum. MSNBC's new parent company, Versant, is part of this transformation. Maddow admitted she's also unsure about the pronunciation of Versant, which only adds to the perception that this rebrand is off to a rocky start. Still, corporate leaders believe this new direction is important. They're emphasizing independence, innovation, and a move away from the legacy structures tied to NBC News. By stepping out of NBC's shadow, MS Now wants to define itself as a completely separate news entity with its own identity and vision. So why is MSNBC, after decades of brand recognition, making such a drastic change? According to Maddow and company executives, the timing makes sense because MSNBC is no longer just an extension of NBC. The spin-off allows MS Now to operate as a 24/7 independent news platform without being tied down to NBC's traditional programming. Maddow pointed out that NBC still runs legacy shows like The Today Show, Nightly News, and Meet the Press. Those programs serve a different audience and represent a more traditional approach to broadcast journalism. Meanwhile, MS Now wants to lean into round-the-clock coverage and a distinct voice that reflects today's media environment. This kind of rebranding move always comes with risks. On one hand, a fresh identity can reinvigorate a network and help it stand out in an increasingly crowded media landscape. On the other hand, dropping a long-established name like MSNBC can create confusion and potentially alienate loyal viewers. For decades, MSNBC has built recognition around its brand. Changing that identity is like starting over in some respects, and audiences don't always welcome such shifts. The fact that one of the channel's most famous anchors is openly confused about the new name shows just how tricky this transition might be. Critics on social media have been quick to mock the rebrand, with many suggesting MS Now sounds more like a tech app or a streaming service than a serious news network. Others argue that rebranding in the middle of a turbulent news cycle may not be the smartest timing. However, supporters of the change say it's necessary for the network to evolve. The digital age has forced every media outlet to rethink how it presents itself. A name like MS Now is designed to emphasize immediacy and on-demand information, which aligns with how modern audiences consume news, quickly, constantly, and across multiple platforms. Rachel Maddow's lighthearted remarks about the name may sound like jokes, but they also reflect a broader challenge: how to sell this new brand identity to the public. Maddow herself has been the face of MSNBC for years, bringing in millions of viewers with her primetime show. If she struggles with the rebrand, what does that mean for everyday viewers who tune in? It suggests the network has a lot of work to do in terms of messaging, marketing, and helping audiences adjust to the change. For a rebrand to succeed, the name needs to feel natural, and right now, MS Now doesn't quite have that effect. The addition of Versant, the new parent company, adds another layer of complexity. While corporate restructures and spin-offs are common in the media industry, they don't usually happen in such a public way. Most viewers don't think much about who owns their favorite channels, but when ownership changes also come with a complete rebrand, the shift becomes impossible to ignore. Versant is promising that MS Now will deliver a fully independent 24/7 news operation, unencumbered by the legacy ties of NBC. That vision is ambitious, but it will only resonate if audiences actually feel that difference in the content and delivery. From a business perspective, the rebrand also signals how competitive the news industry has become. Networks aren't just competing with each other anymore. They're battling streaming platforms, podcasts, independent creators, and social media channels that break news in real time. By calling itself MS Now, the network is clearly trying to brand itself as the go-to source for immediate, always available news and commentary. The question is whether that new identity will truly resonate with viewers, or if it risks sounding too much like a marketing gimmick. One interesting point Maddow made is that this split allows MS Now to directly compete with NBC, rather than operate as its sibling. That's a bold move, considering NBC News is one of the most established names in American journalism. Maddow suggested that the two brands are now moving in completely different directions, with NBC sticking to its legacy shows and MS Now chasing a more modern, independent identity. This competition could actually sharpen both outlets, forcing each to carve out its own distinct space in the media ecosystem. Of course, viewers ultimately decide whether a rebrand succeeds or fails. In today's media environment, audiences are more skeptical than ever. If the rebrand feels authentic and is backed up with quality content, people may embrace MS Now over time. But if it feels like a cosmetic change with no real difference in substance, viewers might reject it. That's why the coming months will be critical. How the network markets itself, how it communicates the value of the new brand, and how its anchors talk about the shift will all play huge roles in shaping public perception. For Rachel Maddow, the rebrand might feel awkward in the short term, but it could eventually give her and other anchors more creative freedom. The shift away from NBC's traditional programming model means MS Now could experiment with new formats, digital-first content, and interactive storytelling. If done well, this could actually position the network to connect more deeply with younger audiences who consume news differently than past generations. The rebrand might be clumsy on the surface, but the long-term goal is about keeping pace with a rapidly changing media world. So where does this leave things? On the surface, we have a major network with a brand new name that even its top anchor admits feels a little strange. Beneath that, though, we see the outline of a much bigger strategy. One that involves independence, modernization, and a desire to stand apart from legacy news outlets. Whether or not viewers embrace MS Now, the move represents a gamble on the future of news itself. And like any gamble, only time will tell if it pays off. For now, the awkward confessions, the online jokes, and the uncertainty all underscore just how challenging it can be to reinvent a name that millions of Americans already know. Another factor worth noting is brand loyalty, something networks like CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC have built over decades. When a trusted name suddenly changes, it can feel jarring for longtime viewers. People often associate news brands with credibility, stability, and familiarity. By shifting from MSNBC to MS Now, the network risks shaking that sense of trust. This doesn't mean viewers won't adapt, but it does suggest the transition period could be rocky. Loyal audiences may need consistent reassurance that while the name is changing, the journalistic values and personalities they rely on are staying the same. The rollout of MS Now will also be closely tied to marketing and branding campaigns. How the network explains the meaning behind the new name, how anchors introduce themselves on air, and how digital platforms adopt the identity will all influence its success. In an age when audiences are bombarded with new apps, services, and brands daily, clarity is crucial. If MS Now can quickly establish itself as a recognizable, easy-to-understand brand, the confusion will fade. But if the messaging remains inconsistent, the awkwardness that Maddow highlighted could linger far longer than executives want. Another interesting angle is how advertisers respond. Networks depend heavily on ad revenue, and advertisers often prefer consistency when choosing where to place their dollars. A rebrand can either excite advertisers with a fresh look or make them hesitant if they sense instability. If MS Now can position itself as a forward-looking, innovative platform for news, advertisers may be more eager to invest. On the flip side, if the rebrand creates uncertainty about audience retention, it could take time to rebuild confidence in the marketplace. At the end of the day, Rachel Maddow's candid comments highlight the human side of this transition. Change can be uncomfortable, even for those at the very center of it. The awkwardness around the name MS Now may simply be growing pains, the kind of bumps that come with any major rebrand. If the network delivers strong journalism, compelling programming, and a clear identity, the name could eventually become second nature. But right now, it's a reminder that reinventing a trusted brand is never simple. The journey from MSNBC to MS Now will be closely watched, not just by media critics, but by millions of viewers who want to see whether this gamble truly shapes the future of cable news.